Hi all, welcome to the Marquee Matchups for the 5th of May. Quite a lot of games this week in terms of what to expect. Hopefully you find this useful as always. We only had 2 nailed last week because Sociedad and Ingolstadt were the 2 odd games that I didn't even expect, and I don't think anyone did. But if you can smash likes, be awesome, sub to the channel for you now. Follow me on Twitter at GIsALegend. All the links are down below for playlists on the channel and social media links as always. So let's jump into the games and go over them. So Juventus Torino is the first game that I fancy of the week. It is the Turin derby, so it has a very good chance, hopefully. But saying that, we all thought that about Lazio versus Roma, and that didn't happen. In terms of good ways to kind of prepare for this, Torino have quite a few upgrades. So look at the upgrades like Belotti, Rossitini, but keep aware of guys like Maxi Lopez has had a downgrade. And then Juventus players, options like Rugani, Asamoah, Lamina, these are sound shouts to go for, and Neto as well, to be honest. But 1 from both teams, 11 from the league, 5 rares, 5 nations, 79, maybe even 80 overall at an extreme, 6 to 10k for cost, as 7 out of 10 with a gold players pack for your reward. Milan Roma is the alternative in the Calcio A. Because obviously Milan and Roma is kind of 2 big teams in the league, it has an opportunity. But 1 from both teams, 11 from the league, 5 rares and 5 nations, 79 overall rating, 6 to 10k for cost, 46k reward and a 6 out of 10 for likelihood. Good sound players to go for are like Lapadula, because he's an Italian striker. You could also look at Chesney, Donnarumma, Vermaelen, Vangioni. Same with, then you could look obviously like Rugani as well and Medel for your other options. You could look into the Italian players or you could look at other nations. But there is plenty to work with. Delafeu and Honda are also good shout because they're both 8 to 1 rated. Then Rosenborg versus Brandt is like one of the biggest games in Norway for what I've gathered, and as a result I actually quite fancy this as one of your lesser routes of the week. 1 from both teams, 11 from the tip of the game, 4 rares, 7 Norway players. You could also get quite a few nations into this as well, like Iceland and Denmark. There is enough to work with. I'm saying 68 overall rating. They might push it to 70 because there's quite a lot of decent 70 rated players in the league, so keep that in mind. 3 to 5k cost, 3 to 4k reward, 6 out of 10 for likelihood. Good shouts to look at are like Gabrielson, Swasabango, Regunson and Husklepp as well. Then Aylesland and Mould, I've stuck with practically the same team for this because I think it would kind of work. But Aylesland and Mould, another big game in the league. 1 from both teams, 11 from. I've kind of tweaked it slightly where I'm doing 3 rares, 6 Norwegian with 68 overall rating, but 5 out of 10 for likelihood. But Aylesland and Mould, Mould have plenty of decent players. Vergaard Foran is the highest rated player in the league for a non-rare for the silvers. And Mould, well, I don't think he plays for Mould anymore. For 74 rated, he is quite useful if you can nab him cheap. But there's plenty to work with in the league. Like Helund's another good shout at right wing, and you'd kind of be sorted and you can work with bronzes and silvers. Besiktas Fenerbahce, this was the muck up we made last week, and obviously this week is when they're playing, so we've got that kind of right. And this week has to, in my opinion, I fancy it. 1 from both teams, 11 from the league, 4 rare, half a dozen rares. Apologies on. I think they'd kind of give you like between 4 and 6 rares. 5 nations, 79 overall rating, 69k for cost, 46k reward, 7 out of 10 for likelihood. Sound players to go for. For a goalkeeper, look at Babacan. Your back 4, look at Squirtle, Agar. Then Besiktas Adriano, you can get him for 350. Marcelo, Rodolfo, Visca, Wagner Love. Etu's another good shout, you can get him relatively cheap. Ben Hatira, not too bad either. A-League final, now at the time of this being recorded, it looks like Sydney are getting through in their game, so in theory then it's Melbourne and Perth is the other game to look at. Now in terms of the way I'm thinking to cover your back, I would personally look at Ruben Castro, Fornaroli, Bobo and Papadopoulos, all because all 4 are 75, 76 rated, and then you can kind of build like a bronze and silver team around them. So like Holosko, Young, Ben Kefala. There's plenty to work with, but 11 from the league, half a dozen clubs, 5 nations, 70 rating overall, 3 to 6k for cost because your cost would be so cheap once you've got the golds in. You could put Castro into like a cam kind of role and it might work depending on what they do for a formation. But a 7 out of 10 I really fancy it because it's the end of the season next week in Australia. Dortmund Hoffenheim, I don't really fancy this. because we've just had a German route. But Dortmund and Hoffenheim are kind of fighting for the Champions League, so it has a bit of importance in the league with not many games to go. And 11 from the league, 6 clubs, 5 nations, 79, maybe even 80 overall rating. In that case, the left mid I'd easily just swap for a gold. The team actually goes to 80, no problem. It's just because I threw a bronze in just to kind of keep the costs a little bit down. Dortmund players: Schmelzer, Ginter, Bartra, Dembele to extent, Schürrle as well. Hoffenheim, you've got Kramaric, and you've not really got much else for Hoffenheim. You can look at Schule as well, but 4 out of 10, I really don't fancy it this week. Hull versus Sunderland is like a bottom of the table clash in the EPL. There's only really 2 games that stand out in the EPL. Prime Electrum Pack would be your reward for this. 79 overall rating. An emphasis on English players is what I quite fancy, with 6 rares, 1 from both teams. 69k for cost, could even push to 10k depending on what they do, and 5 out of 10 for likelihood. I don't fancy it too much because Hull and Sunderland, despite both teams fighting to, well, Sunderland are practically relegated, Hull are fighting really hard to not get relegated. But good players to go for: Hull, Ndiaye, El Abdelouli. Sunderland, you've got Pickford, he's kind of your sound shout. Defoe's another one because he's quite high rated. And then from there, just kind of build around the league. There's quite enough cheap options, so you wouldn't worry too much. Sheffield Wednesday Fulham is a playoff kind of clash in a sense. Both teams are guaranteed in the playoffs. It depends where they will finish in the league. And because it is the last game of the season in the Championship, it has a bit of importance, because I think both teams could fight for 3rd, 4th, 5th and 6th, and depending where you want to finish. But in terms of my personal opinion, just buy all the golds. That is kind of what I'm doing with the league if this was to happen. 11 from the Championship, 4 rares, 5 nations, 74 rating overall. And the goals, to be honest, there's quite a lot to work with. You can get him McGeady, Gale, Chester. There's your rares right away. And then Bridcut's cheap, Hooper's not too bad, Fabian Fry's not too expensive, Dix isn't expensive, Malumbu, Tete, you're sorted. Excelsior versus Feyenoord is a Rotterdam derby for what I've dug down in. Freddie is a good shout for your SBV players. Sam Larsson at left wings are a good option for other teams. Feyenoord, you could look at Bottigan, El Amadi, Vilhema, Duckcoit. So you're kind of well covered. 5 to 7k for cost, 5 out of 10 for likelihood. 4 rares, 5 nations. Then from there, 1 from both teams, 11 from the league. And I would say 75 overall could be enough, but they might want it a little bit higher, so keep that in mind. In that case, the silvers that I've got up top and in centre mid would have to go to gold, and it probably pushed about a 77 rating in no time. So quite a bit of flexibility in this route. Arsenal Manchester United is kind of like the big game in the EPL this particular weekend. 81 rating is what you're going to have to expect. They've now really tried to make the EPL squads harder, and this is where throwing in guys like Xhaka and Mandanda, Coleman and Baines are suddenly now becoming more regular. But 1 from both teams, 11. I hope they don't do 2, but cover your backs with 2 players just in case. But 6 out of 10 for likelihood, 8 to 12k for cost. It's not going to be cheap. 5 to 7k reward, a rare Electrum pack. Is it the 30k one? I think it is. It's the most expensive one. Players like Fellaini, Rashford, Young, Lingard, they're kind of sound shoots. Arsenal, you've got Ospina, Xhaka, Ramsey. They're all your Giroud, so you're sorted there. And the last game of the week is New York City FC versus Atlanta. The reason why this game has been featured is because NYCFC are kind of one of the relatively new expansion teams, and Atlanta's one of the newest. And because both teams are now kind of in the game, and there's plenty of players to operate with, and I quite fancy that they might sneak in an MLS route just in case. But my kind of recommendation for this is, if they do an MLS route, look at Atlanta and Minnesota players. So like Demidov is kind of a good shout. Then you've got Josef Martinez as well. But also look at the golds within the league. There's a lot of them you can nab for cheap, like Morales, Nagbe, Nikolic, Kamara, Gashi, Fellheiber, Tim Howard. There's a lot you can buy in the league for relatively cheap. But 1 from both teams, 11 from the league, 6 clubs, 5 nations, 75 rating overall, 5 to 7k cost, 4 to 6k reward, and 5 out of 10 for a likelihood. Now I would say it'd be relatively easy. Well, I always do the 100k as you know. But for me personally, a lot of tough games to back this week. My main 4 that I fancy for all you that are curious is Juventus Torino, Rosenborg versus Brann, Besiktas, Fenerbahce and the A-League final. That is the main 4 that I fancy for this week. Let me know in the comments down below what you fancy for the marquee matchups this week. If there is any other games, let me know in the comments down below. It would be much appreciated. I don't think I've missed anything. Take it easy all, thanks for watching, and I will catch you all later.